All right, welcome back to Ducks and Pucks. This is your host Mike Walters, along with my co-host Eddy Jones, and we're going to talk about the past games this last week and preview the upcoming games as we always do. And we got some big news to talk about. Bryzgalov possibly coming to the Ducks, and some injury news about Perry with some updates, and talk about hip checks in the league and whether or not they should be allowed or not. But first, let's get to the games this past week. Eddy, the Ducks did well. They went 3-0 in the first week. Obviously, they're all close games, but we start off with at least a decent game in beating Boston.
Yeah, and I think everybody's getting used to close games now, and we're not going to get blowouts every game, but you don't always want to see the games be so tight and scraping by with a win. But if you can start the month 3-0, then I really don't care how they get the wins. But yeah, the Boston game was what we really expected. It was gonna be a tough game. Boston's not as good as they used to be, but they're still a good team when they're on their game, and we saw that against on the night against them. And we started off with a kind of weak first period, but it was 0-0 after the first. So that's something I kind of like to see is lately that we've struggled in a period we've gone down 1 or 2-0, but they were able to hold them off and come out strong in the second, even though getting scored on first. Vaughn scored a minute later, and then Smith Pelly scored with a couple seconds left, about 20 seconds left in the second period, and we continued that into the third period and scored early on and within the first 5 minutes, and played a strong third period as well. So not another game where it wasn't a full 60-minute effort, but I think the period where we did struggle this time, the defense played well enough, and Anderson had a great game as well, so it didn't really come back to haunt us this game.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the first period start was definitely a little bit of a slow one, and they kind of got down, especially in the shots. It was 13-7 in favor of Boston in the beginning there, and they definitely had more of the opportunities. So it was one of those where when you do come out even out of a period, if you do feel good, that's when you feel good when the other teams kind of carried the play, and then Boston got that first goal, like you said, but it was good to see the Ducks rattle off three straight in the second and the third to pull out this one, Eddy. I don't like getting down early. I mean, obviously nobody does, but the Ducks are always a team that when they get down, they always, it's just like they just don't care. They're just like bring it on because they can come from behind, as we'll talk about in some of the other games this week.
Yeah, and you don't always want to get behind, but when your team, and we saw this a lot last year when they had a great record. I believe it was over 700 when they were down by one, they would come back and win about 75% of the time. So when we can go down by a goal or two and come back and win the game, it's obviously a good thing. But they got to work on not getting down so often and not having to come from those positions, because when you're in the playoffs, that definitely can come back to haunt you. We also saw Bolesky get another goal, and I know we talked about him last week with if it was worth re-signing him, and he's slowly mistaking a claim that he's not just started off strong, and we're already more than a quarter of the way, almost a third of the way through the season, and he's on 13 goals now after scoring again twice this week. So he's definitely somebody to keep looking for to get secondary scoring, and hopefully other people can pick up the pace and catch up with him.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and as we'll talk about later, with Perry's not going to play today against Winnipeg, so we'll talk more about that in the upcoming schedule. But Bolesky's going to definitely be one of the guys to carry the load, and hopefully some of the other guys, Palmieri, Silverberg, will start picking up as well as we have seen. And moving along in the next game, we saw a lot of that scoring all over the place against Philly, which was a wild shootout win for the Ducks, 5-4. Again, this game the Ducks got down by one goal, and they answered back with a goal by Fowler, and then they ended up going down 3-1 in this one, Eddy. And then it's just crazy. I mean, they rallied back, scored three goals to go ahead 4-3, but then gave up the tying goal with 2 seconds to go, which was just an irritating, especially being there and watching in person. Or some of the fans had talked about the first round. The second round first game against the Kings in that similar scenario, which it felt like. But at least this time the Ducks came back and won in the shootout.
Yeah, and when you look at the first period, it was almost non-existent in this game, so it's hard to judge them on a full, it's like we've been talking about constantly in this full 60-minute thing. With both teams had four shots, and there really no chances at all in the first period, and until we move into the second is where we start seeing obviously 6 goals in the second period, and a period where I felt Anaheim dominated a lot of the play. They outshot Philly 19-10. But they got scored on first, and even Fowler getting a relatively quick response in 3 minutes after. But we see Philly taking advantage of their chances in the second period and grabbing 3 goals on only 10 shots, and a period that we dominated so well offensively, we were just poor in our own end, and they grabbed another one about 30 seconds after Fowler scored, and they picked up a power play goal. But when with the domination we had that period, we made it count as well. But when you do so well in a period, you don't want to allow 3 goals on 10 shots. Luckily for them, they were able to score 3 goals as well, and it was tied going into the third period.
Yeah, I mean, then the third period was even, crazy too, because you had, Maroon getting that lead. Everything looked good. You get down to the final seconds, and Devontae Smith-Pelly, has the empty net chance to win the game, and the puck just bounces over his stick, and one final rush by Philly, and then here we go. Simmons gets his own rebound, just crashing the net. And frustration. I mean, set in on a lot of the fans' parts, but it was good to see, the Ducks in the overtime come out strong, and they battled it out. They obviously they ended up even, and then in the shootout, like we've talked about before, Silverberg and Perry, man, they've been killing it in the shootout, Eddie.
Yeah, and it's obviously a good thing if we're gonna continuously go to the shootout to have two guys who can score most of the time. In Perry and Silverberg, and you don't want to go all the way there. I know we're 4-3 in the shootout, which isn't a great record, but you don't want to go there that often. I believe we're, if not top of the league, close to it, and the amount of shootouts we've played so far this season. But you definitely want to have guys who can win you games in shootouts, and Perry and Silverberg are two of those guys. You don't want to end up being like the Devils last year when you go to about 12 shootouts and you lose all of them. So having a winning record in the shootout is definitely good, but we'd definitely like to win in regulation, especially getting scored on with only 3 seconds to go.
Yeah, we talk about regulation wins, which the Ducks picked up against the Wild, and this game was just completely crazy. The Ducks started out well. They had built, a 3-0 lead early in the second period, and then a couple penalties and a 5-on-3 power play for the Wild. 2 goals in 11 seconds, and all of a sudden, the 3-0 lead is 3-2, and the Wild ended up getting another one to tie the game before the end of the second period, and then another to start the third, and they're up 4-3, Eddie. And it's good to see the Ducks come back and win. Again, our 50-goal scorer, Jackman scoring again, and then Bolesky pulling off the game winner there. But man, this game, we thought we had it. I thought this was going to be one that finally we're going to win by more than a goal, and it just didn't happen. We kind of had a meltdown in the second period. Granted, 5-on-3 is nothing to be upset about, giving up a goal, but 2 in 11 seconds, that just can't happen.
Yeah, and with Perry going down so early, I was worried about who was going to get the offense done, and if you look back to the last time Perry was out, it was Kessler, and he picked it up again this game, and he had 3 points, and he was the main reason we're up 3-0 going into early into the second period. But then the 5-on-3 hit us. They didn't score until the 5-on-3 was on, and Mika Kura obviously scored, and that's not a big deal. It's a 5-on-3. Obviously, it's going to be hard to defend against that, but when you let in a goal, and you don't regroup, and then they're still on the power play, and you let them score, 11 seconds later, that's going to put you behind the block, and obviously all the momentum is in Minnesota's favor, and we saw that and near the end of the second period, obviously again when they scored, and into the beginning of the third period where they scored within 2 minutes. So the momentum just completely shifted after that. That those two goals on the 5-on-3, and the Ducks couldn't seem to deal with it, and until obviously Jackman scored about a minute 30 later, which was I thought was extremely important that they scored within a minute or 2 minutes after getting scored on, and blowing that 3-goal lead. They needed to get some confidence going, because I think if Jackman hadn't scored when he did, the game could have got out of hand, and obviously we know Bolesky continued his hot streak and scored near the halfway mark of the period, and the Ducks held on for the win, and got a much needed regulation win. Although it was closer than we'd like. Everybody thinking it was going to be not a blowout, but at least a game where we kind of won comfortably and didn't have to hold on. Didn't really turn out to be that way.
Yeah, I mean, we ended up in a nail biter winning it. One thing I did like is I like Tim Jackman's effort on that goal. He goes for the shot initially, gets his own rebound back, and then puts it back in. That was just a great effort by him to get it going. And I think, we're going to see more and more of him throughout this season because, as we've talked about before, the forecheck's always been an issue. And Jackman likes to go into the dirty corners and work hard and go in front of the net. And, I applaud him for that. And I hope that more of the guys pick that play up, obviously, when we all are healthy and all that other stuff we've been talking about. But that's the type of plays that the Ducks need, to pull out some of these games, Eddie.
Yeah, and we've seen that kind of rub off on Smith Pelly this year, and he's kind of take that upon on his role too. Even when Jackman is in the lineup, he gets in the dirty areas in front of the net and creates havoc. And I think that's another reason why Bolesky, that was his role last year, and he didn't get a lot of the goals. A lot of his goals last year were because of that, but now he's in a different role, and it's freed him up to score goals. But you need those big guys to get in front of the net and create screens and make chances out of plays that normally wouldn't have a chance of going in. And I think Jackman has done a great job of that this season, and so has Smith Pelly.
Moving along, in regard to this game, Eddie, the hip check there on Perry. Some of the fans have talked about it, and what are your thoughts on hip checks in the NHL, and if they should be changed or not allowed or anything at all?
Well, I think hip check should be allowed. I think the way a hip check is judged as a contact to the knee could be looked at a little bit more. Obviously, knee on knee is severe and worthy of suspension. And a hip check being, depending on the two players, the player who's getting checked and the player who's checking the other player, their height comes into a factor. Is a lot of times his hip could make contact with the knee, and what we saw with Perry, and is that now counted as a hit to the knee on purpose, or it's not a knee on knee, but you're going for the knee. So it kind of gets shady in there, that there's no real discrepancy between the two. I don't think hip checks are taken out of the game because they're a legal check. They're just as legal as any other check. But like I said, if there's a contact with the knee, I think it should at least just be looked at and at the same as a knee on knee.
As far as a penalty, you think that if
it's penalty, suspension, anything like that. I don't think the hit on Perry was intentional, or it was a hip check from a smaller guy on Perry. He ends up hitting him in the knee, and Perry obviously goes down. But I think they could look at it, if not during the game, after the game, or give the refs a little bit more leeway in deciding if that's a more than just a check, if it's worth a penalty, or and after the game worth a suspension if he's intentionally going for the knee.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're right on that. I don't think they should take out the hip check, because to me it's a high risk, high reward move. I mean, the defender's going in there, and if he lands the check, he's pretty much effectively going to take the player out from possessing the puck in that point in the game. But we've seen it too, where the defender goes in and misses, slams his own hip into the boards, and then also his back against the glass or the boards too. So yeah, I mean, it's a move that can injure the defender as well.
Yeah, and a lot of times if you miss, you're out of position as well. You're crouched over, and you're basically there's no chance of you getting back into the play. And like hip checks have always been in the game, and obviously there's regards when you say it, they've always been in the game. Fighting's always been in the game, everything. But this is a whole different thing. You don't see a lot of injuries with hip checks at the same level as fighting and other things that are getting talked about of taking out of the game. So, but just like I said, looking into it and if there's intention to go for the knee or to harm a player, then I think then you could look at it. But like the one against Perry, I don't think was intentional. Like I said, it's just the size difference between players is what really determines where you're gonna hit them with your hip check. If you're smaller and you hit Perry, you're gonna hit him on the knee, and if you're taller, you're gonna hit him near the waist, and it's gonna be what a regular hip check is. So I don't see it being a big problem. Luckily for us, Perry isn't hurt. It doesn't look like he's hurt long term. So I think in the future, it's worth looking at a little bit more, though.
Definitely, I agree. And looking at this week's games, it looks like from what Perry said in his interview that he hyperextended his knee, and obviously he's not going to play today against the Jets. But this week, if he can't go, we're going to be playing the Jets twice and Edmonton twice. So I guess first looking up at the Jets, it looks like for the Ducks, the key is going to be stopping the top line, Eddie.
Yeah, and that's well, Winnipeg's won two in a row, and it's mainly because of those guys. If you look at their stat sheets, most of their game, it's usually a goal and a couple assists from these two guys, with Wheeler, Little, and Ladd combining for 19 points. All of them having 19 points, and the next highest guy is a defenseman in Buffalo who has 12, and their second line is all on 10. So you stop these guys, you stop any goal scoring that they have, and they don't score a lot of goals either. They're near the bottom of the at least the Western Conference in goal scoring, and they've relied more on good goaltending and quality defense this season. So if you can stop that line and put a couple goals past them, I think you're pretty good to go. They don't have a lot of secondary scoring outside Wheeler, Little, and Ladd. And they've got Michael Hutchison, who we'll probably see in one of the two games this week. I don't know about the first one, and we'll see Pavlik in another game, more than likely. Hutchison has been great for them this year. Something they really needed is a guy who could help out Pavlik. And Pavlik's he's struggled the last few seasons, but he can be lights out on any given night. So I think the key is to shut down that line. And if we put three past Winnipeg, then I don't think there's any chance of them coming back.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the key for the Ducks tonight or today, playing Winnipeg, is to get three or more goals on them, because like you said, they scored the least amount of goals in the Western Conference, except for Edmonton, who we're playing this week. So it's definitely going to be that type of game. Obviously, without Perry out, it's not going to help us. It looks like Devontae Smith-Pelly or Palmieri is going to bump up to the front on the first line, and with the other going on the second. And the Ducks recalled Raquel, so he's going to come back in at center. So the other guys are going to have to step up, Eddie, this game, and obviously the ones against Edmonton too.
Yeah, it's just secondary scoring is gonna have to step up, and I think with a lot of games we have this week against two against Winnipeg and two against Edmonton, I think if you want to have a guy like Perry out for any of them, it's in a schedule like this where we're playing a Winnipeg team who's done all right and he's on a 2-game winning streak, and they've played pretty good lately, but they're still not that great of a team, and an Edmonton team who's lost 11 in a row and could have potentially be on a 13-game losing streak by the time we play them. If Perry's to go down at any time, this is the time that you'd want him to go down. So yeah, I think with the Winnipeg game, it's to shut those guys down, and moving on to the Oilers. There's not much to say other than this game it has to be won. You don't want to be the team if the Edmonton doesn't beat the Sharks in their back-to-back. you don't want to be the team who loses to the Oilers. And the first game we play them as well is right after they've played the Sharks. So not only are they possibly coming off a loss and riding a 13-game losing streak, they're tired too. So I think at least the first game we play them is definitely a must-win.
Yeah, and they're in the same position too as the Jets almost. I mean, you look at it, it's Taylor Hall and Nugent Hopkins leading the way. But like the Jets outside the first line, Eddie, there's really not a whole lot of scoring. You got Schultz in there with 11 points, Purcell with 11 points. But if the Ducks can really shut down the top line and score 3 or more, I think we can win all these games this week.
Yeah, and barring those guys, there really is no scoring on, and it's not. I know they have the least amount of goals in the Western Conference, but goal scoring isn't a main issue in Edmonton. It's goaltending and defense. Their defense is terrible, and their goaltending is even worse. And we'll probably see Victor Foss. I believe Scrivens is still out injured, so we'll see Victor Foss play at least one of these games, and I think that goes against Edmonton even more, with a lot of the players obviously knowing tendencies that Foss has with his time in Anaheim. This could be a really, really bad game for the Oilers, and continue their slump with the 2 games that we play against them.
Yeah, you mentioned Foss, and it's kind of surprising his stats. I mean, he's 2-6-2 with the goals against a 3.23 save percentage, 8.91. I mean, I'm just kind of surprised. I mean, he did well for us, and some people were upset when we let him go, and but I think part of it, you can't put all of it on him too. I think, like you said, it's a team defense issue as well, Eddie.
Yeah, and with their leader and Ferentz, he's got to lead the line, and he hasn't done a lot of that this year, and they have a lot of young and experienced defensemen, and they don't really have any big bodies back there, and I think if we can establish the forecheck in this game against the Oilers, there's really no coming back for them. They get a couple goals like we said, and tire them out. They'll be already tired coming off a game against the Sharks, so this first game should be a must win, and really the second game should be a must win too. It's Edmonton. There's no excuse for losing to them right now.
Yeah, and looking, we talk about winning the week. The Ducks won last week, going 3-0 in those games. And who do you pick up in this last week as being the Ducks 3 stars over those 3 victories, Eddie?
I think one of the guys I have to go for is Sammy Vatanen. He grabbed 2 goals and for defenseman, obviously that and for him too, that's great. And I think as well as his offense, he's been great defensively, and he's starting to score goals not just on the power play and get points in the power play. He's doing well on even strength now, which is great for him. And another strong week for Vatanen, and hopefully he'll continue moving forward.
And who would be your second star?
I gotta go with Getzlaf. I think he picked up about 3 or 4 points this week, and he just led the team. He came up with timely points throughout the 3 games we played in, and even when we were down, up 3-0 going down, he's the guy who's got to get everybody going, and he's the leader. So I think he's definitely my one of my stars for this week.
And then probably I agree with you on the first 2, and then we talked about this before, but the third one probably going to be a little bit tougher. Who, if there's 1 or 2 names that you would throw in there as being at least the third star coming this week.
Yeah, there's 1 or 2 names you could throw in. You could throw Matt Bolesky. He had 2 goals this week. Lindholm and Fowler picked up a number of assists and played solid. But I think based off of the importance of Ryan Kessler in the game against Minnesota, he had no points in the first 2 games, but with Perry going down and Kessler grabbing 3 points and getting the Ducks out to that early lead, it definitely is one of the reasons we won that game, and I think it's the main reason we got him is when guys go down like Perry and Getzlaf, or they're not playing well, he'll pick it up, and we saw that when Perry was down with the mumps earlier this year. We saw that when Perry went down in this game, Kessler picked up his game and definitely helped out the Ducks.
Yeah, I liked his play in that game, Eddie. And I remember when we played the Kings too, he did well. my thing is it seems like he has either a 2 or 3 point night or a 0 point night. I'm just hoping with Kessler, I want to see a little bit more consistency. I mean that's my only thing with him as far as at least on the score sheet. Obviously, he's still going to hit people. He's doing well in the faceoff. He's playing defense. He's doing everything else that we need him to do. I just like to see him start getting some more points, even if they're assists on a regular basis. That's my only critique. And nothing negative against him. It just seems like he's kind of hit or miss some of these games.
Yeah, and I think that's because we see him. He knows he has to step up when guys aren't playing well, and a lot of the times we don't see him on the score sheet is when he doesn't need to be. Is when Perry and Getzlaf are playing well and getting most of the points and setting it up, and then he takes a more defensive. What we talked about in the beginning of the season is we're gonna have one line who's the shutdown line. If that's going to be Getzlaf and Perry's line, then Kessler's going to get the points. If that's going to be Kessler's line, then he's freeing up that first line. So a lot of the games when Perry and Getzlaf are getting a lot of the points, Kessler's doing the job of shutting down the top line or the second line of that team and freeing up space for Getzlaf and Perry. And I think that's where you have to look at in those games. And then you see him, he still has 21 points in 28 games. So he's doing great for us this season, and you see him step up when guys like Perry go down or aren't playing well. That's when he comes out and gets a 3-point game, and I'd almost rather have him do that than I'd obviously love him to have consistent points every game, but I love the job he's doing shutting down other lines when he's not scoring. I think it's one of the best pickups the Ducks have made in recent years.
Oh yeah, I completely agree with you. On the defensive front, and especially, we talked about the faceoffs being an issue as well, and he's definitely the reason why the Ducks have been, in the top 10 in faceoffs this season. So he brings all that. That's just me being, I think, selfish, but I just like to see him score some more.
Yeah.
I was hoping for a hat trick that game against the Wild. Starting out with the two early. But yeah, I mean, I'm not disappointed at all. I just like to see him get more.
Yeah, I think everybody was expecting a hat trick that game, but it kind of got away from us there. But picking up a win either way, and he's had strong play all season, and hopefully, I think you'll probably see a lot from him tonight as well. With Perry being down, he'll be relied on more, so maybe he'll pick up a couple goals tonight as well.
Yeah, I think this week definitely he's gonna be in a spot to get some more points. Looking at the team now, Eddie, with some of the injuries going around. Obviously, Perry will keep everybody updated as we hear stuff. Also, LaBarbera went out with an injury, which brought in a familiar face, Ilya Bryzgalov, which out comes all the the funny post interviews and comments that he's made. He's always been a character, but he's always been someone that's he's played well in net. He was with the Ducks. When we won the Stanley Cup, he actually was part of the reason we won the Cup. I mean, there were games that he actually came in and played when Jaguar wasn't in, and did well for us. And it looks like he's on a tryout basis right now. And what do you think about him coming up and backing up Anderson?
I think he just needs to come back to a place where look at the two places he did the best. He did the best in Phoenix, and he did the best in Anaheim. I think he needs to play in a place where there's less pressure on him, less media pressure on him, and obviously he did great in Anaheim, and he did good in Phoenix as well. And then his career kind of took a turn when he went to hockey focused areas. Obviously Philly has other teams too, but they're more focused on hockey than say Phoenix and Anaheim are, and as well as with Minnesota for sure. So I think him coming back here, I like the move. Listen, LaBarbera's down and Gibson's down. We need somebody, right? Who are we gonna play other than Anderson right now? No, nobody. So I think Anderson needs breaks in these games when it's back to back, and if it's a 1 year and Bryzgalov does well, then I don't mind it at all. But we've been killed with injuries in defense and goalie, so I think right now he's on the tryout, and if they see any good form from him at all, then he'll sign in. I think it's just a matter of money right now.
What do you think though, as far as the goalie situation? Remember we had Danny on earlier in the preseason, and she had talked about Gibson, and her thoughts, being out there in Norfolk and watching Gibson, was that hey, he needs to go back to the minors, he needs some more time. Do you think Bryzgalov comes in and is the permanent backup the rest of the season with Gibson and LaBarba staying at Norfolk, or do you think Bryzgalov's just a temporary fix, maybe for the next month or so until Gibson's fully healed?
Yeah, and this is the problem he gets into because that temporary fix was LaBarbera, and obviously management showed, they wanted Gibson to be up in the and we heard Murray say that in the beginning of the season he expected Gibson to be up for most of the season and play a role with Anderson. I think they still want him to be that guy, but his injury might be a lot worse than that we're told with them looking at signing Bryzgalov. Obviously, we know LaBarbera, they don't want him to start a lot of games. Otherwise, he would have when Anderson played a lot of those back-to-backs. So they must know. Obviously, they know things that we don't. So I think Gibson's injury might be a little bit more serious, and Bryzgalov's going to start for now. As to when Gibson comes back, it's hard to say because they're looking at the same situation in St. Louis now too, with Martin Brodeur just signing a contract, 1 year, $700,000 contract. And Brian Elliott, he's not out to the end of the season, and I don't think Gibson's out to the end of the season either. So at one point for both of these teams, they're going to have three goalies that they would want in the NHL. And if Bryzgalov is playing good, do you either trade him or you say if it's not a two-way, which I doubt it's going to be a two-way for Bryzgalov, you either put him on waivers and he gets picked up, and you bring up Gibson, or you trade him, or you put Gibson down in the minors because he's on the two-way. And it'll be an interesting decision when it comes up. Obviously, we're a little bit ahead of ourselves. We haven't even signed Bryzgalov yet. It might not happen. Gibson might come back earlier than we thought. Bryzgalov might play bad, and then it's an obvious decision. So I think in a couple of weeks we'll know a little bit more based on who's going to be sent down and who's going to stay up.
Yeah, and you're right, Eddie. It creates kind of an interesting situation because when the news came out with Martin Brodeur, I was kind of like, okay, that's good for now, but like you said, what's going to happen when you got three goalies now? And that's what the Ducks are, I mean, and technically we haven't even talked about Bobkov either, which, he's been up before this season and then sent down, so there's really the Ducks have five goalies. I mean, it's just crazy the amount that they have. I mean, I know like we are a little bit ahead of ourselves. I mean, there's a lot of reports out there saying that the Ducks will sign Bryzgalov. Nothing, official, at least at the time of us doing this podcast. But it's going to create an interesting situation because if Gibson is more injured than we know, which obviously the team's going to know that and not always, disclose it, then I think you get Bryzgalov and you do put him in there for a while, unless, like you said, he falters, which I don't know if he will or not. I mean, I know he's not game ready. That's what he said in his interview. He said he's not, 100% ready to go. So that may weigh into it. But if he's able to come in and play decent on at least the back-to-back games, I'm good with that, Eddie, because I'm just kind of tired of throwing Anderson out there every single game, especially, as we talked about last podcast on the back-to-backs, both times had rough games. I mean, we need somebody in there to pick up those games and give Freddie a break.
Yeah, and I think if management believed in Bobkov, then Bryzgalov wouldn't even been signed to a tryout. So I think it's a matter of time, like you said, before he gets signed, and then he plays as the backup role. So Anderson doesn't have to play these back-to-backs. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do when Gibson gets back up, because I was really looking forward to seeing him starting these odd games before he went down with injury. So. We'll have to see, in the coming weeks or months, depending on when Gibson gets back.
Yeah, and as far as other injury news out there, we still have, Heatley's still been out also with a groin injury too, and it looks like they're not really in a hurry to rush him back now getting Bork in that trade, Eddie.
Yeah, and at least we have enough forwards to fill the injuries. With getting Bork, I think that's worked out well now with Heatley down and Perry down. We can, fill in slots in the lineup without having to bring up guys like Wagner, and it adds to our depth, at least with NHL experience guys. Like I said, it's not like Bork is going to do a lot, but at least he's had NHL experience, and we don't have to bring up, a lot of guys who haven't had a ton of experience. With defense though, it's a little bit of a different story. Obviously, Fistrick's back now, which helps a lot. We still got Boschman and Brewer and Lovejoy out. But it looks like we're going to be at least be able to start, 5 NHL guys, and then Manson, who we talked about last week, is probably the closest guy to being NHL ready that's on that AHL call-up list. So I think if he's the only guy that's starting from that call-up list, then I think we should be good to go at least until Boschman or Lovejoy or Brewer get back into the lineup.
Yeah, I mean the defense is definitely the issue. I agree with you. I think Manson is been playing well, playing the body well, giving some good hits. He's definitely going to be up in there, and it looks like Lovejoy. I haven't seen anything recently, but I think he's maybe a couple weeks away. I think maybe Eddie, but I don't think he's too far off. But obviously Francois is going to be a lot longer because he just hurt his hand more recently.
Yeah, I still don't think Boschman is going to be as long as Lovejoy was out. With Boschman it's a finger and Lovejoy it was his hand. So, but Lovejoy's been out for more than a month now, about a month and a half almost now. So I think he should be back, within the week or two. And Brewer is going to be the long-term one out, 4 to 6 weeks. He'll be back well into January. Maybe close to February. So having Boschman and Lovejoy back is going to help a lot. But getting Brewer in a trade and then having him go down so early definitely was a big blow to the blue line.
And also the Ducks did make a move too. They sent Blacker to the Panthers and got Kobe Robach. I don't know if he's going to play in the NHL though, Eddie. I think he's going to maybe just be a backfill in the AHL at Norfolk. I don't know. Any thoughts on this move?
It's probably more of a move for Norfolk, but I know Robach is a little bit of a bigger guy, a more defensive defenseman than Blacker, and something that if we're gonna call guys up is more something that we need. It's not a big trade. Maybe they see more potential in Robach. I've seen a lot of Jesse Blacker when he was playing with the Marlies in Toronto, and I didn't see a lot from him, and that's why when we gave up Peter Hall, and for him, I didn't think it was a good trade. So maybe I haven't seen really anything, buying a little clips here and there of Robach. So maybe he'll come in and he'll be one of the guys we can call up, similar to Manson, and he'll make a good impact, maybe break into the lineup eventually. But I'm not expecting too many things.
Yeah, I mean he is a big guy, like you said. He's 6'3", almost 200 pounds. So he's definitely a much bigger defenseman. That fits the Ducks, But he's only played 42 games in Florida over the last 3 seasons and change. So I don't see him coming up and playing too much. But Blacker was a little bit of a disappointment in that the Chicago game I was at after Thanksgiving. I mean, talk about baptism by fire. I mean, he just got smoked at the blue line a couple times. Which was just very, very frustrating. I mean, granted, it's Chicago, and yeah, they have good forwards and forecheck, but I mean, God, if you're gonna bring in someone and you want to shine, that's a game you want to shine, and I really think that performance or lack of was part of the reason why he got moved, because he, like you said, from what you've seen too, is he obviously plays more of an offensive defenseman style, but I mean, he just gets burned too much at the blue line.
Yeah, and we've got guys like Fowler and Lindholm and Vatanen in the lineup consistently. You'd like the other 3 guys in the, not to say Vatanen, Lindholm, and Fowler aren't defensively inclined, but you want those pure defensive guys to at least to be the other 3. And we see that when we've got Boschman and Lovejoy, and when we had Allen and Stoner. Those guys are all defensive guys. Lovejoy Lovejoy's more of a two-way guy, but you want to have those guys who are just big defensive defensemen as those other 3 to counteract those offensive guys, and having a guy like Blacker in there kind of tips it more towards the offense. So I can see why the move was made, and obviously all best of luck to Blacker, and bringing in a guy who at least has played some NHL games, playing 46 games with the Panthers, and a bigger body, similar to kind of a Manson guy that we can call up, and he's got some experience, Fistrick kind of thing. So I think it's a good move, and it adds depth to our blue line, and to an area we need it in those defenseman guys.
Yeah, I agree, and hopefully we just get the defense, back healthy and get rolling. Obviously this week and win this week, and we're gonna wrap up now. And just want to remind everybody, don't forget to follow the podcast and follow the email list on the blog. We've been giving away either Ducks and Pucks shirts or Ducks related merchandise, and next month, the homestand, we got the Temu night. January 11th. So we'll be giving away some Teemu Salami trading cards. I'll be giving away a pair of those to 2 random winners next month. So make sure you sign up and follow the podcast and blog, and we'll see you next week.
The Anaheim Ducks are the Stanley Cup champions.